This is the White Coat Investor Podcast, Milestones to Millionaire, celebrating stories of success along the journey to financial freedom.
This is Milestones to Millionaire Podcast number 158. Hospitalist pays off student loans in just over 2 years. No more wading through dozens of books at the library, scrolling through hundreds of blog posts on dozens of blogs, or checking in daily with online forums trying to gain a financial education the way the hobbyists do. For a fraction of the price of hiring a professional financial planner, the Fire Your Financial Advisor online course will take you from feeling anxious and having no plan to having a written financial plan you can follow the rest of your investing career as a professional and a retiree. This course is the material that should have been taught to you in college, medical school, or residency, but never was. Fire Your Financial Advisor also has a version eligible for CME credit. So get your financial life in order today. Go to whitecoatinvestor.com/courses to sign up. You can do this, and the White Coat Investor can help. And on that page, you can actually learn about our other courses as well. We have one that's continuing financial education that we put together using material from our conference every year. We also have our No Hype Real Estate Investing course and several other courses there. So check them out. Are you a student? If you're a student, you should be coming to our webinar. This podcast drops on the 19th. The webinar is the 21st. So you might have already missed it if you didn't listen to this in the first 3 days after it dropped. But if you go to whitecoatinvestor.com/student webinar, you can sign up 6 o'clock Mountain Time, February 21st. It is live and fun. And we're going to be there teaching about what students need to know about finance. You know, the truth is, I can't come out and talk to you all in person. Never could. There's too many schools, too many students. Frankly, it's too expensive to go out because schools can almost never have any money to pay me to come out, much less, pay me something for my time. So this is what we do instead. We put together this webinar once a year. This is the lecture I would give you if I came to your medical school and talked to your class. You're going to learn about why your patients need you to be financially literate. We're going to learn about how to become a financially successful doctor. We're going to talk, for those of you with a little bit of money or second careers or whatever, how to invest during medical school. We're going to talk probably the most important subject for you students out there, how to not worry about your student loans. We're going to talk about how to save money during residency interviews and why buying a house during residency may not be a great idea. Becoming financially literate early in your career can be worth millions of dollars over the course of your career. You can't afford to wait till the big attending paychecks roll in to learn this stuff. You need to learn it now. So we'll see you on the 21st. Sign up again, whitecoatinvestor.com/student webinar. All right, we got a great guest today. Stick around afterward. We're going to talk about emergency funds. All right, let's get our guest on the line. My guest today on the Milestones to Millionaire podcast is Claire. Claire, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Tell us what milestone we're celebrating with you today.
So I paid off all of my student loans a couple of months ago, and that's what we're celebrating. I'm super excited about it.
Awesome. Congratulations. How much did you pay off?
$235,000 after all of the interest and all of that.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of money, not as much as some of the people in my residency had, but certainly a fair chunk of change.
What do you do for a living? How far are you out of residency?
I'm a hospitalist. I'm working on my third year at the hospital that I work at now. So I am 6 years out of medical school now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how did you, lots of people have more debt than this. How did you keep your debt that low during medical school?
Yeah, great question. So a thing that really, really helped is having somebody that I lived with. I had a partner at the time that paid for room and board. So I only had to take out the amount for tuition. And then I think I took out an extra maybe 10 or 15,000 towards the end of end of medical school to help pay for residency interviews and things like that. But I definitely didn't spend all of that much on residency interviews. So that helped a lot. It saved me probably $120,000, $140,000 on room and board. So that definitely helped.
Yeah, I find this amazing because I look at the statistics. I look at the exit survey every year that medical students fill out. And the MDs say they come out with about $200,000 on average of those who owe money. This doesn't include the ones who don't owe anything. The DOs, it's like 240. The dentists, it's like 270. And
Goodness.
there must be an awful lot of people that didn't borrow the entire cost included in that to keep that number so low.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a lot of people in my medical school whose parents were much more well off than I was, and that, I think they had their parents helping them out. And my parents
Yeah.
helped me some, but not not a ton,
Yeah.
which was
But still,
fine.
you ended up with more than reportedly what the average is. So you paid off more than above average student loan debt, according to the surveys that we see out there.
Well,
So what was your
yeah.
income over the last 3 years to pay all this off?
It kind of varied because I was doing some moonlighting. At the urgent care in town. I haven't done that in about a year, but my W-2 from last year, the last year that I got a W-2 was something like 290, which is, a fair amount. Um, and then I think my W-2 for this year is going to be less than that because I haven't picked up an urgent care shift in the last 12 to 14 months now.
Yeah. So clearly, boosting income was part of this live like a resident period for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I started working moonlighting as a resident when I was a second year. Um, right after kind of the pandemic started, I started working a few urgent care shifts, maybe one a month or something, depending on what rotation I was in. And then I worked maybe 10 shifts over the summer in between graduating and starting my big girl job. And then in the first year of my job, I worked maybe one, maybe two shifts a month when they really needed me. They were pretty short staffed for a while.
So my notes from you say you paid off this $235,000 in 2 years, 1 month, and 8 days. But who's counting?
Yeah, certainly not me.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm doing the math here, and I'm thinking, okay, well, so she makes 250, 290. That's 500,000, slightly more than 500,000. You paid off 235,000. With some interest over the last few months, anyway. A lot of that time, maybe some of it wasn't going
Actually,
up
there
due
was
to
there was
interest.
a long time where it was not accruing any interest. I paid it off before the interest started to
Oh, very nice.
reaccrue. That was why I wanted to pay it off then. And also my birthday was coming up and I wanted to be debt free by then. So
Well, happy birthday. That's a pretty cool birthday gift.
thank
But
you.
I'm doing the math. I'm doing the math here. Half of your income went to these student loans over the last 2 years.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Half of your gross income. How'd you do that?
Well, I just didn't live any different than I've always lived. I drive a 21-year-old car. I didn't buy a house. I have a partner that is on board with this whole thing and is splitting household costs with me. I metaphorically and literally wash my plastic bags, my Ziploc bags. So I don't buy new stuff until I need it. And this is just how I've always lived. My parents raised me on a single income for the first 15 years of my life. And so, there's a certain amount of living like this that goes along with that. None of my hobbies are real expensive. I did residency during the pandemic, so I really didn't travel because, who wants to sit on a plane breathing everybody's air? Not me. um, and so it made it a lot easier because it wasn't a huge imposition on my lifestyle to live like a resident for a couple of years more.
How much did it bother you to borrow this money?
um, well, my parents raised me with a near pathologic aversion to debt, but I didn't have a choice. I could either not be a doctor or I could borrow this money, and I couldn't not be a doctor. So that's what I had to do. But it definitely bothered me continuing to have the debt, and that's why I paid it off so quickly. I couldn't. Some people did the PSLF, and I just couldn't do that. I couldn't live like that for 10 years.
So when did you decide you were going to take this debt in a corner and drop an anvil on it? Did you decide this in medical school or residency, or was it not until you were an attending, or when did you really decide that this is the way you were going to deal with your debt?
Yeah, I knew sort of the prevailing mentality in medical school was just get her done, just borrow it and just deal with it later because I wasn't making any money at the time. Um, I tried to sort of like pay off the interest every 6 months or so, but that added up pretty quickly. So I had to stop doing that. But then when I was in residency, I never stopped paying the minimum, which for me was like $64. So that doesn't even cover the interest, the daily accruing interest, which is just ridiculous. But so I never stopped paying the interest. And then once the pandemic, like once the interest stopped reaccruing during the pandemic, which was great, that saved me like $10,000 a year, which is crazy. Um, I just kept paying it off, and every so often, if I had a spare $5,000 or something, I would just throw it at the debt. Um, and then my parents, like technically paid off the government, and then I owed them at 1% interest. And then once I finally got my job, I just said, you know what? I can do this. It's going to take a year or two, but darn it, I just want to get this done. I can't live like this. I don't want to live under debt.
What did your parents think when you started sending them huge checks every month?
Oh, they were delighted. Like I said, they raised me with a certain attitude towards money, and they were delighted, and they were encouraging me every step of the way to just get her done, get her done, get her done. And so that's what I did. They ultimately forgave about $15,000 of the debt, which was really helpful. Um, but other than that, I paid them off. And I mean, really, I was just giving their money back to them, which is, so they were just happy to have it back. But it was a
Yeah.
pretty safe investment for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they know you, right?
Yeah.
But there's still some risk. I mean, you could have become disabled or died or something like that. There's some risk there for
I
sure.
felt yeah, that is absolutely. I like lived in fear that I would just like die, and then they'd have to pay it off, and I'd have taken all their money, and I would have felt terrible if that happened. Not that
Yeah.
that was like a legitimate fear, but I did think about it.
Yeah. I know early in the pandemic, all of us were thinking about that as
Oh
we were,
God, yes.
walking through the COVID ward.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I'm glad we're not doing that anymore.
yeah, for sure. So did this turn out to be easier or harder than you thought it was going to be?
Um, I thought it was going to be really hard. And then, I make a fair amount of money, and once you make that much money, it just accrues really quickly, and it was a lot easier than I thought it would be. It still took a couple of years, which I was a little bummed by, but I mean, that's 2 years is pretty good.
You're somewhat unusual in that you're driving a 21-year-old car while making
Yes.
250 or $300,000 a year.
Yes. Yes. But like I said,
That's
it's
really
just
hard for people not to have a lifestyle explosion when they leave residency. How are you able to not have that? I mean, clearly some of your upbringing played into that. Clearly you wanted your debt gone early, but it's still hard not to have upgraded that car. I mean, it's probably a
it's
$2,000 car, you
It's,
know?
I bought it for $4,000 right before medical school. It has driven me across the country the equivalent of about 5 times. So it is a good little car, and I reward loyalty.
Very cool.
um,
All right, all of you out there
yeah.
who are sending me emails, who are leaving speak pipes about how you must have a $20,000 car. Here's a good
$20,000. Who
example of.
spends $20,000 on a car? Good Lord. But I will say my poor little car is due for an upgrade. He started to go into what I call AFib, but what the mechanic calls something with the intake valve. So we are shopping for a new car.
All right, very good. You certainly deserve it. And now you have the cash flow to buy a very nice car that you
I
can save
do.
up for in very few months.
I could pay cash now. So that's
Awesome.
great.
Awesome. Well, I hope you treat yourself to that. That'd be a great way to celebrate, your birthday and paying off these debts as well. What's next for
Yes.
you after the car?
I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead yet. At some point it would be nice to have a house so I can finally do the garden stuff that I want to without worrying about upsetting my landlord. But for right now, I want to play a little bit of catch up with my 401k and just my savings and whatnot. I've been maxing out my 401k, maxing out the match for my hospital this whole time. Um, and so, that's something else to focus on is that. But honestly, I don't have a lot of huge financial goals other than replacing my car and, maybe getting a house at some point. But that's not coming up anytime soon. The housing prices here are, honestly pretty crazy. So I'm hoping they maybe settle down.
Okay, well, there's some people out there among the 30,000 people listening to this that are family practice residents. They are internal medicine residents. They are coming out of residency this summer. They're going to have a job in a clinic or as a hospitalist, and they're sitting on $200,000 or $300,000 in student loans. What advice do you have for them?
Just pay it off. It feels so good, honestly. It really does. I it's it's so important to have somebody on board with you, like your partner, your family. It's so, so important. That was really important for me. Um, it was also easier for me. I don't have kids. I don't have expensive hobbies. I don't have a lot of overhead. Um, so if you're a single or like partnered resident without any kids, like go nuts. That debt is just going to keep dragging you back for the next however many years until you either pay it off or the government manages to pay it off for you. And there's no substitute for how good it feels to get out from under it and not have to think I have to be in my job because I have to pay off my student loans. I cannot leave my job. I can't do anything. I have to just pay off my student loans. And now I'm not saying that I would leave my job, but now like I could just go do something else. And that's
Yeah.
really freeing.
Yeah, you're really not done with medical school until you paid for it.
No, no.
Yeah. Pretty awesome. Well, you should be very proud of yourself. You've done something remarkable, and we're certainly proud of you. Thank you so much for coming on the Milestones to Millionaire podcast to share it with others and inspire them to do the same.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad that I could meet with you. I've been following you on Instagram for a while and, taking advantage of some of your tips. And I really appreciate being able to be on the podcast. Thanks so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. All right. I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Claire's great. I love her comment. $20,000 on a car. That's crazy. It's true though. It's all about mindset. And when you realize that you can live like the average person in this country, yet earn like a physician, it's amazing what you can accomplish financially, whether that's saving up a big, huge down payment, whether it's paying off your student loans, whether it's, getting to fire super early in your career, whether it's saving up and buying some fancy Tesla because you're sick of driving your $4,000 car, whatever it might be, you can do it, but only by having some discipline and some financial literacy. Don't forget about our Fire Your Financial Advisor online course. You do not have to do this the same way I did. You don't have to read dozens of books. You don't have to read every blog you can find out there. You don't have to check in daily on the forums. You can take a course that will help you lay out a financial plan for a fraction of the cost of what hiring a financial planner will be. It's called Fire Your Financial Advisor. There's another version eligible for CME. You can check them all out, whitecoatinvestor.com/courses. Okay, now I promised you that I was going to tell you about emergency funds. So, what is an emergency fund? Classically, an emergency fund is a pot of money that you can dip into in the event of an emergency that doesn't require you to borrow money. Okay, so it is cash. Almost always it's cash. It's sitting in your safe at home, in your drawer under your bed. It's in a checking account. It's in a high yield savings account. It's in a money market fund. Maybe some of it's in something like I-bonds or something that you've had for at least a year and can sell on a moment's notice. But this is money that you can use instead of borrowing. Okay. You can use it in the event that you get a call that grandma's dying and you need to come see her before she dies and come to the funeral. It's money you can use when the washer and dryer conk out. It's money you can use when your transmission dies or your $4,000 car dies. You can probably replace that out of an emergency fund. But it's classically 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, not income. So if you're making $10,000 a month, you don't have to have a $30,000 emergency fund. If you're only spending $5,000 a month, you only have to have a $15,000 emergency fund, right? So it's all about your expenses. And the more stable your financial life, the less you can get away with, If you're pretty unstable in how your financial life goes, maybe you need 6 months of expenses. I like to keep mine somewhere where it earns a little bit of interest, but is still very liquid. That means either a high yield savings account, or these days you can usually earn more in a good money market fund, such as the Vanguard Federal Money Market Fund. So that's probably where most people have most of their emergency fund. I do think it's important to have some in a local institution, someplace you can walk in and get cash out, in an hour. And I think it's important actually to have a little bit of cash at home. I think that's part of an emergency fund as well. So make sure you get that in place. Don't go chasing yield with it. It's about the return of your principal, not the return on your principal. But it needs to be kept fairly safe. Now, does there come a time when maybe you don't need an emergency fund? Sure. If you're retiring and part of your retirement asset allocation is 5% of your money in cash, and that adds up to be, I don't know, $300,000, you don't need an emergency fund too. Your entire portfolio is your emergency fund. So there comes a time when maybe an emergency fund isn't so important, but that time is certainly not in the first 5 or 10 years of your career. Okay. All right. I think we told you everything we're going to tell you today. That's all we got, man. If you guys want to be on this podcast, you can come on. You can apply whitecoatinvestor.com/milestones. If you listen to our sister podcast, the White Coat Investor Podcast, you can leave your questions for that at whitecoatinvestor.com/speakpipe. All right, you can do this. White Coat Investors here to help you. We're proud of what you're doing. Accomplish these milestones, tick them off one by one, share them with friends, family, the White Coat Investor community, and we will cheer you on and use your experience to inspire others to do the same. See you next time on the podcast.
The hosts of The White Coat Investor are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is for your entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.